Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is noon Eastern time here in the booming metropolis just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, known as Ambler, PA. So Thursday, noon Eastern time, you know what that means? It is time for Talent Experience Live, the show that covers everything that you need to know in talent acquisition, recruiting, talent management, human resources as a whole. And today, HR events. I am your host, Devin Foster. And before we get into chatting about if HR events are worth it or not, first we have to pay the bills. Talent Experience Live is proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion people find the right work. We do that through our intelligent talent experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond. Recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers get to build better teams through data, insights, and analytics. And all of this is powered by super slick artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if any of that interests you at all, don't walk to phenom.com immediately following the end of the program. So I alluded to it there a little bit. We are chatting today about HR events. Every year, it seems like there are more and more. And the question really begs at the beginning of the year, is it worth it? Is it a budget line item that you need to have? And today I am joined by a very special guest, JD, to chat all about HR events. JD, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah. And it is always great to be back on the show.
I love having you here. We're going to start off with a quick little icebreaker. How many HR events have you been to?
Over what period of time?
Well, yeah, I mean, your life. But let's start post-pandemic. How about that? Since 2020.
Okay, so I'm not a practitioner, right? So as a vendor,
Yes.
we're at many events. So we're at all the bigger industry events from a Phenom perspective. As a marketer, I've been to no market.
And welcome back. That was a brief commercial break sponsored by the Black Abyss that happens when we have this show from time to time. The simple mind blanks that I have, neither here nor there. Right back to where we were. JD, yes. We had just kicked things off. I want to ask you, you mentioned that you had been to a ton of events as a vendor.
Yes.
None as a marketer, right, where you're going
yes.
to explore things. But I think the next question when folks are looking at the events calendar for 2025. I mean, here we are, we're 9 days in right now. I don't think there's been 0 HR events so far in 2025.
Can't claim to know any.
Yeah, I do not know any either. I think the first part of deciding whether or not an event is worth attending is when it falls in the calendar, right?
Sure.
I think to myself when I attend events as a civilian, right? Like I knew I wasn't going to the Jets game on December 22nd because it's 2 days before or 3 days before Christmas. I know I'm not attending an event on May the 5th because that's my wedding anniversary. And then I would never get to host another TXL game. So how much does timing and scheduling really impact attending events or not?
Yeah. So right before that commercial break, you kind of asked me, what events I've attended. And I said, as a marketing leader, since COVID, I haven't attended any events, which is maybe odd to even admit. But what that doesn't tell the full story. And so several of our marketing team members have gone to marketing events and events for education and upskill. So as a leader, maybe I have not personally went to events, but we've gone to events as a team, as a marketing team, right? And I'm sure it's very common in other business units. So what timing? I would say timing and relevance are the two biggest factors. Right. After that, there's a whole bunch of other factors. I'm sure we're going to cover them, but timing and relevance are really important. And if there's an event that someone on the team wants to go to, and the timing doesn't feel off, we've got other priorities, pressing priorities, we need the full strength of the team, it's really hard to say yeah.
Mhm.
Because saying yeah in your gut says, oh, we really shouldn't have those folks out of the office right then. And then relevancy, I think, is just natural. Okay, is it relevant to what we're doing?
Mhm.
Is it too aspirational? Do we think we're going to get impact? That boils up really quick too. Even when timing is, yeah, that's really great timing. Now, how is it relevant?
Yeah. And I love the fact that you mentioned talking as a practitioner, right? We're not doing this for HR vendors in the space. This is for
Right.
practitioners attending events. And oftentimes when you look at a calendar and you see, I think fall events is a great example.
Yep.
Bang, bang, bang. There are, week after week after week, there's a different event in a different city all over the world. You really have to hone in on what's important. And I want to ask you, when some of my team members are asking to attend events, do you oftentimes lead with, well, what are the insights you're going to get here? What's the ROI from you attending this event? And how do you gauge that if you haven't been, perhaps if it's your first time going to attend an event? Is there information about the event you should be looking for?
Well, I want to go into where you went first, and that is you were talking about the timing of events.
Yeah.
And I think regardless of industry, but especially to the HR industry, you have very, very few events in the spring, 1 or 2 events centered around the summertime periods of time. Mm-hmm. And then you have a lot of events all through the fall. And that's what you're articulating. And that's both in the US or North America centric, as well as in EMEA. And EMEA is very similar too. There's that break in that the warmer summertime months where vacations are typically had. There are 1 or 2 HR type events during that period of time. So it's not like there's none. And those events actually have taken an interesting approach to try to attract attendees too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it seems like from a timing perspective, there's a few in the spring, very, very few in the summer, and then the fall is just smack dab with a ton of them.
Timing is interesting from that, right? Because a lot of people are going to educate themselves from this perspective. It feels like having them in the fall, where the vast majority are, we're already beginning to wrap up 2025 at that point, right? It's September to November, and then it's Thanksgiving here in the States, right? Followed by the holiday season, and then all of a sudden you're into 2026. Did you even have time to implement some of the things you may have learned, right, from an educational perspective with that timing versus some of the ones that may be in the summer where you have that ramp up period, or even the spring to what you
okay. So that's here's another good question. I'll kind of ask it back. We could play this a little bit.
Yeah.
What is the best timing for an event in order to do what, to accomplish what, right?
Sure.
So if the idea is for planning, like we're in the brand new year right now, right? We just started for folks who will end up seeing this on demand a year from now. We're just starting into 2025. We're in January 2025 right now. When is the best time to start going to events or to justify the relevancy in the timing of an event? To do what though? To influence this year in 2025? And I think this gets a little opinionated. In my view, at the end of a calendar year for many companies, the focus is starting to be on the next year, but not as ambitious as everyone believes it is, right? Yeah, budgeting cycles are coming to an end. You've given some thought, and now it's like, okay, but we have to close the year out strong. Yeah. So every team is scrambling to close the year out strong, not necessarily starting those new initiatives just yet.
Mm-hmm. So the question for me was, when do I think?
Yeah, when do you think? That's my view.
It's a challenge, right? Because I think you have to truly look at what your goal is for attending these events. If you're a practitioner and you're looking to purchase technology, maybe that makes sense in the fall, right? Where you're ramping up for budgeting that next year, right? Where you have to say, oh, we're sunsetting this technology, we need a new one. But if you're looking for education and to be inspired for the upcoming year, I think that makes more sense early on, so that you can go back to work and immediately hit the ground running before summer break, right? Before all of these fall events, you can start to implement those almost immediately. Whereas in other timeframes, you may not, because your whole team may be out on vacation or something.
Okay, I align with this, and this is going to be very personal for everyone. For folks who have different opinions. So Dev and I are aligned on this. if it's for evaluating vendors, for looking at technology, especially in the HR space, the fall events feel like the right time in order to understand, is this a piece of technology that we think we anticipate needing next year? What are some of the costs of that? Because that does have to be built into the budgeting cycles. It doesn't matter how large a purchase or small that is probably really strong and in great timing from a tech perspective. But now if we shift gears in the relevancy of an event is more towards, Devin, let's say, upskilling employees, right? Upskilling, understanding process procedure. Now what timing do you feel is different?
Upskilling, I think it has to happen early on in the year or in the spring. If no events are happening in January, because we just started the new year, people are wrapping up their calendar years or fiscal years, it makes the most sense to do that as early as you can, as early as possible, because just like things fall off, right? We're talking about new year, new events. I equate it to New Year's resolutions, JD, right? The earlier that you start, the longer you'll keep with it, which is why I don't set New Year's resolutions, because if you want to make a change, you should probably do it when you want to, so you can immediately go through that. There's no date and time. So I would say earlier in the year, the better to attend, to inspire, to upskill individuals, to get that learning value, because if it's further out into the year, we run into those scheduling conflicts, as I mentioned. And what are you doing with that time in between, right? Where you don't have the opportunity to upskill.
It's not just the scheduling conflicts of the fall. The new year, you're starting out. I would say one of the most key times an event that is an event of education, inspiration, upskilling is the first quarter of the year. Why? Because you can make, this goes back to justification, which I know we want to get into, because that's what I think the HR professionals listening to this want to get into. How do you justify, how do you get that budget in order to get to those events? So before we get there, I just want to say it's one of those things where you want to get inspired, you want to get educated, and you want to show the business that you can impact 2025 in this case for this year. I want to say, hey, I'm going to go off somewhere and I'm going to bring new processes, procedures, ideas, inspiration. I'm also going to do other tangible things. I'm going to learn new network and get new connections, and I'm going to leverage those connections throughout the year. So that is the power of having a spring-based event, or justifying a spring-based event that is centered around education and inspiration. If the event's centered around technology, we're agreeing, save that for the fall. Yeah. Because if you don't go to that event, you can do the research online. You're not missing out on a lot of those connections. But the other timing for upskilling inspiration is spring.
Yeah. One other point that I want to make to that is, you're always on every year for the annual reviews that happen, right? And how many of those conversations where talent acquisition leaders are talking to, some of their recruiters, their sourcers or whatever, and it's areas of opportunity, right? Areas of improvement that you focus on to get that next promotion, to fulfill your career. That's great. One of the topics that may come up might be events, right? Or networking. I would like to meet more of my peers and find out how they are effective. If you're doing that later on in the year, what happens in that time in between? If you want to be inspired and network and upskill truly, you want to do that as fast as possible, so that when the next year's review cycle comes around, you don't miss out.
Yep.
Speaking of inspiration, JD, I want to ask you, what does that mean from an events perspective? It's a little abstract, right? You don't think of attending an event, especially an HR event, to be inspired. Oftentimes, I don't think, because a lot of it centers around workflows, technologies, tips and tricks, learnings. When I say that, it doesn't necessarily, I'm not one to be inspired by learning. I read for enjoyment, right? I have my own personal challenge of reading to educate. So what does inspiration in your mind mean at an HR event?
I don't think you can separate education from inspiration. Like in an event, in an overall event experience, I don't think you could separate those. Yeah, you can go to a training session. Yeah. That's not an event. Like, a training session is not an event. So when we're talking events, like, would you go back to an event that you left and said, well, that was uninspiring? No one would. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a sporting event. It doesn't matter what it is. You wouldn't go back to something that's uninspiring. So if you start in the foundation of that event is you getting educated, learning, thinking, like putting your brain to the task of, wow, I'm absorbing so much. By default of the absorption, you are getting inspired, right? By the result of learning and hearing from others, you are getting inspired. So that's why I'm saying, as you're getting educated at an event, as you're learning what other companies are doing to be successful on the same areas that you're struggling with, or that you're wondering whether you're struggling with, maybe you're not, maybe you're killing it and you should be the one on stage presenting to people, right? That's inspiration. So you get educated and you get inspired at the same time, right? And that is one of the best qualifications that you can use to justify an event. Yeah. If we have a marketing employee that comes to me and the timing is right, and they can share with me why this is an education event. Mm-hmm. And I believe at the end of the day, by them being educated, they will continue to be inspired, that they will bring new ideas back into our business, that they'll be able to work with their coworkers and have them inspired and thinking about new process procedure. And we can do that in the first quarter of the year. I'm probably going to bat for that budget every single year. Right? That is a win to the organization. It's a win to the employees.
No, it makes sense. And the only one issue that I had is I've but rarely been inspired at a Jets game, JD, from a sporting event perspective.
Yeah.
That's my own self-pity there. But nonetheless, when you are talking, I don't get much education out of it either. However, when you're in these events, when you're at these events, when you're doing these things, when you're around people who are excited, that's also inspiring. Right. I think to be in those environments where others want to learn, where others want to foster growth, that's going to inspire, where you can see a CHRO who talks about how they didn't start in that particular role. Right. And that happens at numerous events all over the place, whether it's on a main stage or a side stage. You get to be inspired through some of those conversations. The next aspect, we're talking about a lot of things.
I love it. And I'm going to cut you off only because I think it's a really important point to have to be said. The pity at a Jets game is the inspiration.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes. Oftentimes you mentioned I should be up on stage. I think I should be playing quarterback.
That's what I'm saying. So you're inspired to want to do more for the team that you love.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. One good thing about the pity that comes along with the Jets game, it's only 60 minutes long. These events are often much longer. So I want to ask you, there are events that are one day, there are events that are 2 days, 3 days. Is there a sweet spot when looking at the calendar, right? Taking into account how long your team will be out of the office, what travel looks like from that. How much of that should weigh in on the fact when you are budgeting for these events? Should a one-day event that's in your backyard be prioritized differently than a 3-day event with tons of folks that you are inspired by and looking towards? What kind of mindset needs to go into comparing what may be two very different things?
Yeah, I would say the first factor you asked, like shorter event, longer event, it's hard to be out of the office. Let's just admit that. It is hard to be out of the office for multiple days. I don't care if you're in a recruiter role, a sourcer role, and it doesn't matter if you're in talent management. It doesn't matter if you're the CHRO. Days out of the office are hard because someone feels like, wow, we're going to have lost productivity, projects, initiatives aren't going to get done. Mm-hmm. So to go to bat for an event has to be worth it. First of all, and it has to be, we talk about relevant, it has to be timely. And it also has to be convenient enough that it doesn't cost a crazy amount of money that you can't justify it. It can't be short. You can't travel from Pennsylvania to California for a one-day event. It's hard to justify. It's not that you can't do it. It's hard to justify the cost for what possibly you're bringing back. How are you going to spend time networking with other professionals within 12 hours? So the event's 8 hours. It's hard to do. Yeah. So I look at events, and I think a lot of professionals, especially in our HR profession, look at it as, is there adequate networking time and organizational time at an event? That's minimum 2 days. 3 days is probably more of the right timing. If there's an event that is 2 to 3 days and you're talking, dozens upon dozens, approaching 100 breakout sessions, multiple keynote sessions, you're probably dealing with a very high quality event, right? And there's probably going to be time in there for networking with other professionals. In fact, there's another factor. I would say how many of the sessions, because you can't just say, well, something has 100 sessions, it's worth it. How many of the sessions are practitioner led? That is key. Mm-hmm. I'll repeat it. Key. How many sessions are practitioner led, not vendor led, not sponsor led, practitioner led? And if the majority of sessions are practitioner led and there's lots of sessions at an event, wow, can you maximize your time of networking, of learning, and that education inspiration?
Yeah, I think another aspect, you mentioned the timing of traveling from California to Pennsylvania. Yep. It's also getting acclimated, right? People are tired after long travel, right? It takes also a while to get comfortable to network. I think of it like a middle school dance, JD, where whenever we show up to events for the first time, people stay in their little bubbles. It's nature until they're human nature, until they're comfortable. Once you are acclimated and you sit in on a great session and you hear a fantastic question that relates to an issue that you have in one of those practitioner sessions, you may be more comfortable to go up and ask someone, hey, how are you planning to solve for that problem right now in the interim? Since you're dealing with it today, this is what I did. Some of those things take a while where you don't see that at 9 a.m. on a Monday or Tuesday morning. It's the same thing with the workday. But yes, all of that is huge and a big deciding factor. We talked about networking quite a bit here. And I want to ask you, because it's one of my things that I notice at most of these larger events that are vendor driven, is choosing which party to go to, for lack of a better word, right? How do you decide that versus one that may have a large event where everyone is invited, or a large activity where everyone is invited post event? And you'll see that with some of the software focused events as well.
Okay. So I guess I want to approach it differently and then keep me on track. Then keep me on track. So the one question you were asking about is, you didn't ask, but you mentioned the networking, and we spent a lot of time talking about peer networking. I cannot stress this enough. If workers on my team can't show me their ability to network with peers outside of the current organization, it's really hard to justify going. So I think as we build the reasons today of the keys to be able to justify that budget to get to an event, you better be able to prove why and how you're going to be able to network with other companies. And then that means you better make sure that that event you're trying to go to is chock full of other professionals that you're going to learn from, be inspired by, and also develop those connections. Can't stress it enough. It's not about parties. It's not about, oh, I have lots of time to talk to people. Yeah. You can go anywhere to talk to people. It's about building those connections with new peers, expanding your personal network. As you expand your personal network with those practitioners, you're actually expanding the value you're bringing back to your own company, because those are the ones for the next year you want to ping to say, hey, I heard you mentioned that you were using this, auto scheduler to decrease the time of scheduling interviews. Now that we're 2 weeks after the event, do you mind, can you show me what that looks like in your environment? You can't get that if you don't make those connections. I cannot stress that enough. Then you still want me to talk about parties?
No. A lot of the marketing at some events, I won't name names, is driven by activities outside of the showroom floor, which is why I phrase that way. So no, I don't want to talk about parties anymore. What I want to talk to you about, and you kind of alluded to it there, was post-event benefits, right? Yes. Of taking some of the learning, some of the networking that you've done, and feeling comfortable to reach out to individuals, or in some cases, sharing with the rest of your team. Because as we're talking about budgeting, it's because we all don't have infinite money pots at the end of the rainbow where we can send our entire team. Number one, it would be fiscally irresponsible. And number two, who's going to do the work back at the office, right? While you're taking care of these learnings. So how can you gauge the success of an event post-event based on the networking opportunities, as well as the knowledge shared with the rest of a team on some of these strategies and upskilling that you've mentioned?
I think setting a clear expectation about what, as a leader and manager, between the employees that are going to an event, what they're going to get out of it. And it's not just, well, I'm going to get better educated. No, what specifically are you going to get better educated? What companies specifically are you going to try to talk to because you're going there not just to hang out, right? You're going there for a reason. So in advance, if you're really clear about those reasons, okay, my goal is to meet with 10 different companies that are trying to leverage AI in their talent acquisition environment. Okay, that is a great goal. Now, how are you going to go after that goal? Well, these companies and these sessions, I see these sessions here. Here are all the companies speaking about it. I'm going to make sure I or two people go to those sessions. Then after those sessions, I'm going to make sure that I reach out to that speaker and let them know, hey, great presentation. Or I was confused by the presentation. I would love to get some follow-up, because what I found is most presenters at events, especially, the events I've gone to, they're happy to share their knowledge and their challenges and their lessons learned with other professionals. It's a badge of honor to share and to help coach and mentor others. It doesn't matter whether they're outside the organization or not. So having really clear expectations about what specifically you're going to get out of it. How many folks are you trying to talk with or network with? What topics the entire team, talent acquisition, talent management, whether it's workforce planning, whether it's AI software, going into it and thinking, okay, here are the topics I'm going to make sure we cover as a team. Here are the companies we're going to try to meet with. And you have a clear agenda like that, it's really hard to deny budgeting for it. It's really hard to deny travel. You can get the travel budget. You can get the travel budget. You can get the ticket costs, right? Or you can, in many cases, you can ask the vendor and say, hey, I can get there, but can you work with me on your ticket costs? A lot of vendors are willing to do that too.
Absolutely. Especially if you're offering the education that you're mentioning, right? Is for that overall growth. You mentioned there quite a few hot topics. I don't want to call them buzzwords, because I think it's far more than that. Should that have any impact into what you are deciding on attending? Maybe it's from a session perspective, or maybe it's from an overall event perspective. If you have an initiative to implement more AI, if there is a workforce planning, should you be seeking out those things as topics or themes of an event in order to attend?
What's beautiful about what we've been talking about today? Towards the end of the year in the fall, we talk about how timing is so critical. Towards fall, you're starting, I touched the mic, sorry about that. You're starting to plan for next year. You're starting to plan. So teams are starting to begin thinking about their initiatives. Here's our big initiatives. Here's some of the big KPIs. Maybe they're not committing to it yet, but they're starting to size them up. Then that starts being set towards the end of the year. Now springtime comes. You know what the initiatives are, and now you need some education inspiration around figuring out how do we get started in those initiatives. So when you're talking about how should folks go about thinking about the topics and seeking something out, it should align with what the company's initiatives are. Once again, we talked about what education and the clear objectives. Those objectives shouldn't be all personal objectives. Sometimes they're going to be personal objectives, but are they team oriented? Are they company oriented? If all three align, the individual, the team, the organization, once again, really hard for leaders to say no. Really hard to say, no, that's not a good use of the budget. In fact, I tend to see when those three align, budgets are found. They are found, they're dug, and it's like, no, we're sending 3 people to this and we're going to get all this back. And we're going to be able to then make progress on those initiatives because we're going to have the connections, but more of the education, the case studies, and we're going to move forward.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. JD, we've talked about a lot of different factors into events. How can we make sense of all of this? We went through, I think, 7 different topics here today. Is there would you say a ranking of what is most important? Is that dependent on your organization and what you're looking for, what your KPIs are, what your goals are? How can we leave the folks at home watching with some tidbits on how they can go about budgeting based on their needs?
Okay, so help me with this list.
Yes.
So I would say the first clip here is that yes, events specific to the HR industry are really important to the industry. And they're important for 2 different reasons. One, they're important on the tech side, but that's towards the fall. The importance of that is towards the fall. And they're really important from the education and inspiration. And the timing of that one is most important in the spring or in that first quarter of an organization, right? So that's one. So, answer the question. Are they worth it? Absolutely yes, but you got to be careful on what you pick. Okay, that's one. 2, that ties into the timing and the relevance, right? And we just addressed that in kind of that first point of like, yes, they're worth it, but it also is timing and relevance. We talked about 3. If you want to go after budget and ensure that you or your team has that budget cleared, accepted, and approved by management, right, can go to bat for it, you really have to be able to tie it to individual objectives or learning, team individual objectives and learning, in company initiatives, in the progress on those initiatives. All 3 of those. Yeah, and I have to make sense. Okay, it's not a one-day event that you're going to learn all that. It's probably a 3-day event. And then we talked about it. What's the quality of the content? And I'm going to add an extra on this one. So you have the quality of content, which is who is speaking, right? Are they practitioner led, or is all vendor and sponsor led? If it's vendor and sponsor led, probably a red flag, right? I'm not saying it's a no, because you might get something else out of the event, but it's probably a red flag. You want to know that those breakouts are practitioner led, and you're going to hear from your peers or the folks that you want to make those connections with, right? So it's about who's there also. It's really critical. And then when we talk about the quality of content, it has to match the quality of the environment of the event. We didn't touch on this one, right? What we mean by the quality of the event is the AV, is the environment, is the seating, is the lighting, all of the highest quality in order for you to be in that learning mindset and absorption. If it's not, well, that's a waste of your resources. That's a waste of someone's time going to an event, right? So quality speakers, quality AV, all that has to be in check. I've been to events, and I've been to events where you're sitting in the audience. The speaker might be the right speaker. All the slides are washed out because you're in a bright room, or the slide wear is so small on the projector and you're sitting way in the back that you're like, I can't see the slide. I don't know what's going on. Like, that matters when you are going to bat for budget and spending for an event.
Absolutely. It reminds me of like going to a bar to watch a movie as opposed to the movie theater, right? Where there are other things happening, different conversations, as opposed to having that lighting that you're looking for, being focused on the topic, whether it is a breakout session or a vendor, not a vendor, a specific session on a specific topic, or a main stage, right? All of these events have main stage, making sure that the focal point is that education is furthering individuals. Post-event strategy. No, is that the last?
Yeah, we could go. Oh yeah, that would be it. That would be like when we're going through the list of like those important keys and the considerations. Yeah, that post-event strategy. It does tie back to the rest though. If it was the right speakers, it was the right practitioners, if it was the right education and inspiration, now that post-event is really easy. You know, individuals get to show up in the office or virtually, however, companies are configured now, and they get to share, hey, this event was fantastic. Let me share with you all of these different sessions, topics. And by the way, as a leader, the best thing I love hearing, best thing, because I know whether someone actually took advantage of the event, is when they say, oh, by the way, while I was there, I met with so-and-so from this organization. They're looking and trying to think about these same ideas too. And I met this other person at this organization, and they're doing something different. When I hear multiple examples of that, I know not only was that event a good event, but the employees that we sent to that event in particular, we should reinvest in and go, because they're not just maximizing it for themselves, they're bringing that knowledge back to the organization and to the team. That's really important.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts before we go? Anything that's on the tip of your mind?
Do you have something I should say?
If there was one event that, no, would that be too cheesy?
Nope.
If there was one event that you could attend with all of the knowledge that you just provided, what would it be and why?
I am Phenom. No questions. No further questions.
Absolutely. And we have a promo code for individuals for I Am Phenom today. They can use the promo code TXL to get their tickets today. That's capital T, capital X, and capital L.
I have one thing. I don't want you to run and shut down, but I will mention just some things about from an I Am Phenom perspective, right? Justin, you could, yeah, we go. I love that shot. I love this shot. So from an I Am Phenom perspective, the one thing I will say is I Am Phenom has evolved to one of the most premier HR conferences in the world. we've expanded it globally. Not only is it in North America now, we just had our first I Am Phenom India back in December of 2024. So we're continuing to expand the conference and the content. But that content is centered around practitioner-led content. And some of the keynotes are centered around the most advanced HR tech innovation that you can hear of. And so we're really proud of how I Am Phenom has grown right here in the Philadelphia area. If you've not been to I Am Phenom, you have to get there. And this is where Devin's talking about. We're trying to make it easy for some of you who have never been there before. So we've got some promo codes. You can actually reach out to Devin directly. You can reach out to myself directly. And maybe there's a way we can get you there for the very first time. But from a quality conference, you will leave. 100% guarantee from me personally, you will leave better educated and more inspired from that event right now coming up in the spring. And that will trump any education inspiration you get from any other HR event this year. That's a guarantee from me personally. Thanks.
I like that guarantee. Reminds me of Joe Namath, right? Guaranteeing the Super Bowl victory. It's a fantastic event. Like JD said, reach out to myself or to him. We have a great speaker lineup. I don't know if we're allowed to mention some of our speakers there. Head on over to iamphenom.com to check them out. I'm excited. This inspired me for I Am Phenom all over again. We can't wait to see you there. In the meantime, I hope everyone has a safe, happy, and healthy weekend. If you missed any of this episode, you can catch the full replay here on LinkedIn, YouTube, or the audio version will be up on Spotify and Apple Music later today. But in the meantime, thank you all so much. Thank you, JD, for joining me. Recurring guest. Love having you on. And we'll see you in March, 11th through the 13th at I Am Phenom. Thank you so much.